Hello, David. It's so nice to meet you. We've not actually met before, have we? I've heard so much about you. How are
Oh,
you?
thank you. Yes, good. Thank you very much, and very nice to meet you too. Mm.
Have chatted with some of your team because on our
Uh-huh.
behalf, you very kindly administer the Mayor of Bath's Relief Fund charity. So
Yes, that's
that's
absolutely right. Yeah.
that's
Mm.
really useful for us because you've got all the expertise in doing this.
Of course, and that actually provides us. It's very complementary to our crisis fund actually. So
Right.
funding that we provide to individuals in crisis. So in many sense, it just becomes a part of that fund, and
Brilliant.
and all goes to help those individuals who need it.
Brilliant. For those people who might be watching who might be less familiar with St John's overall,
Mm.
could you tell? I mean, you're such an important institution in Bath,
Yes,
and
an
lots of people do
ancient.
have, yeah,
Yes.
lots of people do have connections with you, but there may be some who've got fewer. What would you say the main things that you do are?
So St. John's is all about changing lives for good. That is what our purpose is. It has been our purpose for all of our 840-year plus history, and the way that we really fulfil that purpose is to help older adults to live independent lives for as long as possible. So we do that through all the almshouse accommodation that we own in the centre of Bath and up by the Royal United Hospital. We also provide outreach services which are aimed at reducing loneliness and isolation in older people as well. And over recent years, we've very substantially increased the amount of grant giving that we do. And more recently, we've focused that on the area of dealing with inequalities in our community, particularly helping disadvantaged children. And that is all about closing the educational attainment gap. That gap, of course, denotes so many inequalities and so many of the issues that then cause people to lead lives where they don't make good decisions, for example, and historically we've been involved with many charities that deal with the sorts of social challenges that emerge. But we felt that if we can tackle the attainment gap and tackle the challenge of things that start to emerge at a much earlier stage in life, then that can only benefit the communities in which we work earlier on.
Yeah, completely. I mean, you're talking to my heart really, because my theme for the year was about combating loneliness, as I think you know. So we've been doing a lot of work around that, and also, and it leads me neatly on to the next thing I want to ask you. The inequality is probably the reason that I fundamentally believe it that in local service, because especially if it gets baked in too early, it's something
Yes,
that can stop someone from reaching their potential for the rest of their
absolutely,
lives.
absolutely,
What has
yes.
been the experience that you've had within St John's over maybe the last 12 months with the pandemic? Have you seen that that's had impacts in an unequal way throughout Bath? What's been your experience?
Oh, very much so. I mean, in many ways, our new foundation fund, which is the work that is aimed at supporting disadvantaged children, um, has in many ways it heightens the need for it. What we have seen through many of the charities that we've been involved with is a disproportionate impact on people who are less well off in our community. So we've seen much higher incidence of food poverty across the region. Usage of food banks was well publicised when the pandemic first started. Very sadly, we're aware that domestic abuse, domestic violence is on the increase, and so the need to support those who live with those sorts of disadvantages is even more important, and the pandemic has shown that.
Yeah, and I think the other one I'd add to that, which I know is some things that we've been looking at because we were talking about it with the relief fund as well,
Mm,
is if you are in a family where you have 3 or 4 children and
mm,
between you all you have one smartphone and you're trying to
absolutely,
homeschool them,
absolutely.
comparing and a kitchen table on which to do it because there's no other room, compare and contrast than if you're at home and everyone has got their own laptop, own iPad, lots of broadband. you know, and this could be at really critical times in people's education. It's
Yes.
really something that I feel, you know, and this is why I'm so pleased that I'm talking with you now,
Good.
because
Because
there is such a need for it right now, isn't there?
yes, and it's pushing the attainment gap into reverse. You know, we know that there have been national data published around that, but we know that that's biting hard in some of the more deprived areas in and around Bath. And we have been involved. You know, some of the early project work that we've been doing in connection with our new founding fund is to provide funding to primary schools, particularly where they have high proportions of children coming from more deprived areas, so that they have got access to equipment and access to the internet, because it's not just about having the equipment,
Sure.
it's access to the internet as well, which is important.
And in terms of physical stuff and face-to-face stuff,
Mm.
I know there was quite a large program, wasn't there, at one stage, of sort of creativity to help people with mental health issues, that kind of thing. What are you thinking about when you can maybe restart these kind of elements, or are you still sort of completely in lockdown?
Well, we've tried in terms of our work with older people. Of course, we've had to carry on as normal in terms of the support that we provide for our residents, just in the way that care home providers have had to do, and our staff have been amazing. You know, they've risen to the challenge, and they've made sure that our residents have all been very well looked after. Certainly in the early stages of lockdown, we had all sorts of staff volunteers, many who of course were then working at home, so that the staff that work in the offices, etc., were all at home, but many of them were telephoning our residents, you know, just so that they had some contact.
Okay.
So that was a good way of preventing loneliness. In terms of our outreach activity, obviously that's a lot harder, because all the events that we run on site did have to cease. In those periods between lockdown, we'd started to reactivate many of them, which was good for a little while. We've managed to run some of them online, so there are ways in which we can stay in touch with people out in the community as well. And of course, with the younger people work, we're really working through other charities, and through schools in particular. So yes, there are some challenges in getting direct access, but it's a shared challenge with a number of other organisations, and I think people are rising well to that.
And it's lovely to hear what you said about your team, because I think that's in all the people I've chatted with doing these talks, it seems to have been a common theme that everyone has said, actually, people have so gone above and beyond to try and, you know, have to work in different ways, have to try and deliver the service in a different way, possibly had their own challenges of maybe having to do some homeschooling at the same time as the job, which I don't know how people have coped with that. My admiration for them is boundless. But somehow people have pulled together and created a community spirit that means that we have done our best, haven't we, generally, to make sure that...
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the really good things that came out of the pandemic, is that sense of people wanting to pull together, and wanting to help in any way they possibly could. I know I personally felt somehow at sea a little bit when we were all required to work at home, because you felt as if you were working in a straitjacket a little bit, and it was hard to define exactly what you should be doing straight away. So I think in a way that ability to volunteer in other ways and lend support to other colleagues and to our residents and other beneficiaries, example, was just one good way of almost alleviating the mental stress.
Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? You don't realise quite how much information you share because you bump into someone in a corridor, and you hadn't
Absolutely.
thought to pick up the phone or send them an email, but when you see them, you actually go, I should mention that to them, and then and you lose all that kind of. And it is important work as well. It's not just water cooler gossip or whatever they try and call it. It can be good information sharing. So we've all had to learn to do it
Oh,
differently.
absolutely. But it has been great to be able to come back into the office a little bit, certainly before we went into this last phase of lockdown. And we've created a safe environment in the office, recognizing actually that the mental well-being of staff is, to all intents and purposes, an essential reason why sometimes people do need to come into the office, and we've used that as a principle for good, I believe.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Well, it sounds like not only have you, I don't want to say weathered the storm, that sort of, but you've done the transformational thing of learning how to work differently. You've managed to
No
keep
doubt
the
about that.
services up, and it also
Yeah.
sounds like there's some things that you're going to keep moving when you. I mean, a lot of us are saying, well, we don't want to do Zoom all day, every day anymore.
No,
But the
that's
odd
right.
call, do we actually need to bring people in from all over the place if actually we can do it over the Zoom? So there may be things that we carry on doing. And
I think without doubt, and actually, Zoom is a nicer alternative than the telephone. Sometimes, at least, you see somebody's face, and I think there is no doubt, therefore, that we'll use a hybrid of real meetings and meetings using digital means going forward. But we can't do without contact with other human beings, and I mean real contact. And it will be great when we can get back to doing a lot more of that.
I think that's a wonderful note to end on, because I couldn't agree more.
Mm,
And it, it is my honour to serve the citizens of Bath, but also to be able to say to people such as yourselves, thank you and your team for what you've done consistently, but very specifically over the last 12 months, where you've been
thank
throwing
you.
challenges that you could never have anticipated, and you've risen to them amazingly well. So on behalf of the
Thank you.
City of Bath, thank you and your team for everything that you've done.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. But of course, it is a privilege to be able to do it. You know, I consider myself very lucky, for example, to work for an organisation like St John's, and it's a privilege really to be able to help.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Was that all?